We're a bit past the midpoint of 2026, which makes it a pretty good moment to stop and take stock of where classic World of Warcraft actually stands right now, because as there have been for a while, there are many different versions of the game, all at different points in their life cycle. We have TBC Anniversary in full swing, a seasonal server still going along, and Mr. Pandaria reaching its own conclusion. In addition to that, we have Hardcore and Era Realms, and the small matter of Blizzcon coming up this September, where we're expected to hear a lot more about the future of this version of the game. So this is going to be a check-in on all different points of classic World of Warcraft, how far along each version is, how active they are, what's coming next for it or how much we know about that, and honestly, who should think about jumping into the different versions. So if you've been away for a while and wondering whether now is the time to come back, or you've never touched Classic and you're trying to work out whether you should start now, this should give you an up-to-date read on how things are going. So let's begin and talk about the state of Classic WoW in 2026. We'll start with the biggest one, the Anniversary Realms, because this is where the majority of the population is going to be at the moment. These are the servers that grew out of the 20th Anniversary Classic Realms from late 2024. TBC Anniversary dropped at the start of this year, reopening the Dark Portal, and everyone went pouring into Outland. So right now the servers have been going for some time. As for how progressed things are, we're currently deep into Phase 2, which Blizzard have called the Overlords of Outland. This went live on May 14th and brought in Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep, the two Tier 5 raids alongside Arena Season 2, and some various daily hubs in the game too. It is worth knowing that these raids released in their post-nerf state, so they're tuned to versions we saw later in the original expansion, rather than their more brutal pre-nerf tuning, which we saw during TBC Classic back in 2021. That being said, by now both raid tiers have been out for quite a while, so I'd imagine your average guild is still able to clear no problem. Looking ahead for TBC, Phase 3 is already on the PTR, and Blizzard have pushed a new build a few weeks ago, which is usually the telltale sign that things are getting relatively close for the next phase. Phase 3 of course will bring Black Temple and the Battle for Mount Hyjal as the two new Tier 6 raids, plus the Netherwing dailies for the Neverdrake as well as Arena Season 3. On the activity side, these realms are comfortably the most popular corner of Classic. Checking Ironforge.pro around the most recent reset, the raiding population is enormous compared to anything else we'll talk about today. There is a natural downwards trend happening at the moment that you always see in the middle of a patch more or less, as that's people getting their raid clear and pretty much just playing around this area of content and then waiting for the next thing to drop. So should you play this version of the game? Honestly, if you want to raid or PvP and you don't want to feel like you've missed a year of progression, it's still a good time to make a start. There is a huge amount of Burning Crusade left to go, as we're only now in Tier 5 with Black Temple, Mount Hyjal, and finally the Sunwell all ahead of us. On top of that, the catch-up system for gearing and achievements is way friendlier than TBC usually is. Achievements are all account-wide now, so you can do the Karazhan chain and get the raid unlocks on every single one of your characters instantly, and that's even account-wide. Bloodlust resets on raid wipes, and arena barriers are lower. The whole thing is just tuned to be much more alt-friendly than it was in 2021. So if your memories of Outland are endless achievement grinding and shaman swapping and raid to min-max Bloodlust, then that just doesn't happen anymore. What happens next for these realms after the Burning Crusade wraps up is a more interesting question. The obvious answer, which I think everyone expects at this point in time, is a Wrath of the Lich King anniversary announcement around BlizzCon this year. TBC Anniversary has done really well by pretty much every metric imaginable. I did not think this many people would come back for TBC if I'm being honest, but here we are. And again, looking at Blizzard's own roadmap, we could slot in Wrath Anniversary somewhere at the end of the year. But again, this one is purely speculation. At this point in time, I'm also a bit less optimistic about the possibility of a permanent TBC era, and the simple reason is back when Blizzard did Vanilla Era, they wanted to keep that version of the game around. However, we can see from the population of subsequent fresh Classic releases that they just don't tend to do on average as well. Whereas we had a solid 5-year gap between 2021 TBC and 2026, and the game has absolutely exploded in population because of that. I think at least money-wise, whatever you may want out of TBC era, Blizzard have done better from just not having it exist and just doing a fresh. And we've also seen from a relatively recent leak on the game that there are apparently going to be new freshes for Vanilla, TBC, and maybe even Wrath coming one day beyond that. Though, as always with this game, a lot of things have happened because enough people have made enough noise about it. So if you do want TBC era to be a thing, you should definitely be making noise about it now, whilst we're still in the midpoint of the expansion. The next version of Classic to talk about is Season of Discovery, and this one is in a very different and honestly kind of strange spot, because as far as new content goes, we're all done here. There isn't going to be anything else. Season of Discovery reached its final phase with the Scarlet Enclave raid and wrapped up active development, well, over a year ago now. Blizzard have also flat out confirmed there are no plans for a fresh Season of Discovery either. Agrend even addressed it not too long ago, explaining that spinning up a fresh realm isn't the trivial thing that people assume it is, and that it will pull a big chunk of the Classic team away from whatever else they are working on, and that they simply can't justify the distraction right now, so the version of the game you can play today is what you're going to get basically. That being said, Season of Discovery has looked kind of dead for a long time, until maybe about 1 month ago or so, because the activity picture is more interesting than just the raw numbers on Ironforge.pro would suggest. There, the raiding population sits at only a few thousand across all the servers, which compared to the Anniversary realm does make it look dead. But fairly recently, a group of well-known Classic streamers have organised a community-run event, with everyone rolling new characters together on the Wild Growth realms across both EU and NA. So right now there are going to be a lot of people out in the world, leveling, enjoying the Season of Discovery systems, and really giving it what I feel is its final send-off before whatever happens to it next, which we'll get onto in a moment. But who is Season of Discovery for? Well, again, if you've missed Season of Discovery the first time around, you didn't get too many chances to play it, or you want to revisit it, now is really the time for you to give it a proper look. There's a rune engraving system that lets you slot new abilities into your class, reworked itemization with brand new tier sets, new raids, new world events, and just pretty much everything in a vanilla world, but drastically different. This is nothing like actual vanilla. And with the community now breathing life back into the server, there's a level of activity that realistically, I don't think will be here again. As in pretty much ever. So if the idea of Season of Discovery has appealed to you, you have some nostalgia for it, whatever it may be, play it now, while it's still here and while it's active. What comes next for it is, in a word, nothing new. Blizzard said the servers will be around for a long time to come in many separate blue posts, though they're not putting a number on how long that long time to come actually is. My expectation is very much that around Blizzcon we could see somewhat of a consolidation of the number of versions currently existing for Classic. We've been here before with Season of Mastery. That is the only version of WoW ever to have closed. And as the seasonal name suggests, seasons come to an end, which Season of Discovery technically already has, but it's still just coasting along. It has a very uncertain future as far as I'm concerned, but again, if you want to play it, now is really the time. Next up we have Mists of Pandaria Classic, which is reaching its own finish line at almost the same time. The final phase launched fairly recently with the Siege of Orgrimmar, a massive 14 boss raid that closes out the expansion with the fall of Garrosh Hellscream, who did nothing wrong. Alongside it came the Timeless Isle, the conclusion to the legendary Cloak questline, a new PvP season, and so on. But this is really going to be the final step for Mists of Pandaria, and with how gear progression starts to go in more modern raids, kind of the only relevant raid now is going to be Siege of Orgrimmar for the majority of guilds, so if you wanted to see the Throne of Thunder or earlier raids, I feel as though the time has currently already passed. Activity-wise, I'd say it does better than people would let on. It's somewhere in the middle of the pack as far as numbers go, with the raiding population noticeably larger than Season of Discovery, but nowhere near as large as Anniversary. It is worth pointing out though that Mists of Pandaria Classic will be very endgame focused. This is where people will be concentrated. Also, you can still run GDKPs in this version of the game. Blizzard has not outlawed them, and I have a very strong feeling that those GDKPs are contributing for an enormous amount of the raiders. And because more people are centered around endgame and we're several expansions deep, you don't really get that open world feeling where you're seeing other people all the time or leveling up and coming across familiar faces. People are really there for the raids, to some extent the challenge modes, and the character progression. And that kind of answers what type of person should be playing this. If you've ever been curious about Monk during its original expansion, or you mained a class back then that you want to revisit, now is really the time. We're on the final raid tier, and this won't be around forever. The class design was arguably, retrospectively, a little bit bloated on buttons, and plenty of classes had more abilities than they really felt as though they needed, but it was still fun at the same time. Though since everything is progressed, it really comes down to, do you want to play whatever class you enjoy in Siege of Orgrimmar? On the topic of the PvP and the arena experience, as it typically is with Classic, it tends to be quite difficult to get into because you have a subsection of the players who have played exclusively this expansion for a very, very long time now, and they are just miles ahead of everyone else. The skill floor of the average PvPer in Classic WoW is just so much higher than it used to be. It feels as though the noobs you could just roll over are kind of not really there anymore. As for what happens next, we are still in the speculative territory. Data miners recently turned up the old Warlords of Draenor Collector's Edition mount and pet sitting in the Mists of Pandaria files, which of course set people wondering whether WoD Classic could be a reality. I'm going to be honest, and I'm someone who speculates a lot because you kind of have to with Blizzard, I still have a hard time believing they would actually do this. The whole movement for Classic World of Warcraft started around Warlords of Draenor. J. Allen Braght's quote, "You think you do, but you don't," happened at a Warlords of Draenor Blizzcon. This would very much be taking things full circle in the most unimaginable way possible. If there's any glimmer of hope for Warlords of Draenor, it's that the player base in Mists of Pandaria Classic has shown very strong interest in raiding, and pretty much only raiding, and despite the difficulty of the raids getting higher and higher with each subsequent expansion, Warlords of Draenor did have 3 good raid tiers. Not easy raid tiers, but 3 good raid tiers. And maybe just raiding alone is enough for Blizzard to spend time on this. Again, the announcement point for this happening or not happening is lining up very well for BlizzCon 2026, so expect to hear more about it there. But if you did want to play Mists of Pandaria Classic for any reason, I feel as though the clock is ticking, and if you want to hop in, you should do it sooner rather than later. Next, we have a few versions of the game which are on their own static servers, meaning they're not bound by this constant progression and time window loop that World of Warcraft usually is. The first version I want to talk about is Hardcore. Now, I really like Hardcore because it's less about the progression and new patches, and it's more about just a state of mind and existing within the world. See, the dedicated Hardcore realms are fully progressed vanilla servers, sitting at level 60. It's also worth mentioning that on the TBC Anniversary servers, you can go talk to an NPC and toggle the Hardcore mode on. Now, you will still be playing with the rest of the player base. This isn't its own official server as Hardcore typically is. However, if you did want that challenge and you wanted to make it official during TBC, that is also an option for you. And Hardcore WoW, as the name would suggest, is just playing World of Warcraft Classic, but your character has one life. If you die, that's it, you have to remake and go again. When your characters die, you can also transfer them off to a normal round 2 and continue playing. Working out the population of Hardcore is always very tricky because on sites like Ironforge.pro, they're centered around tracking people based off of raid logs. Not many people even get to level 60 on Hardcore to raid, so it really doesn't do too good of a job of identifying how active the world is. However, at least on EU realms, when I went and looked fairly recently, one of them was at medium population, which honestly is kind of shocking that it's still going this strong so many years later. But who should play Hardcore? Well, again, it's not like other versions of the game where you have to play before something new comes and replaces anything. Anytime you want to is a good time to play Hardcore, but it's always better with more people because the open world feels so much more alive, and you can also find people for elite zones or to just run dungeons with and so on. There's plenty of group content in Classic WoW. It's more about that slow, deliberate, careful play, heavily weighted towards solo, personal progression and the leveling journey, rather than being all about getting towards the endgame as soon as possible. In Hardcore, every single pull matters, and a single death will be a return back to your starting zone. If you've only played normal World of Warcraft and you've never given Hardcore a go, I would definitely suggest considering it at some point in time. It's more fun than it would probably seem. Next is Classic Era, the foundation that so many different versions of WoW have been built on, and there's not much to say about how progressed it is because that's kind of the point of it. It's pure vanilla with no meaningful changes, and it's been sitting in that exact state for many years at this point in time. Your character will never be pushed to TBC or forced to go to an expansion. The raids will always be 40-man, and the game just is what it is. Again, similar to a few other versions of the game, it's holding up quite surprisingly well. Checking Ironforge.pro, the raiding population has remained very consistent over the years. It's even seen a slight uptick in players recently. Maybe it's people drifting over from the end of Mists of Pandaria wanting vanilla again, or people hitting that raid log status during TBC Anniversary and going back to their older characters. Whatever the reason may be, vanilla, it turns out, just works pretty much indefinitely. So who would Era be for? Well, it's for the people that do want that original World of Warcraft experience with no strings attached. You just want a realm with your character on it, where you can come back to that character at any point in time, and your progression hasn't been destroyed. You want to see the old classes and the old raid tiers exactly as they were. You want the good things and the bad things about vanilla all intact. This is the place to be. And given how the populations remain very consistent on Classic Era, I expect it to be there for many years to come. So overall, a lot of things are expected to happen at Blizzcon this year in September. This is where Blizzard are going to be laying out the future for Classic. What happens after Anniversary? What happens after Mists of Pandaria? What happens to Season of Discovery? And are we indeed getting Classic Plus? Blizzard have been alluding to the release of Classic Plus for a long time now. They've been dropping hints for it constantly, data miners have been finding information recently, and there have been plenty of blue posts saying that Blizzard are working on a next big project. And when you tie it all together, September is shaping up to be a properly pivotal moment. I think this will be the biggest announcement Classic World of Warcraft has seen since Classic World of Warcraft was announced. Whether it can surpass Classic WoW's initial 2019 success, that is going to be a bit of a hard one to say, but either way, that's where things are at the moment, and that's where we sit in the middle of 2026. So the Anniversary Realms are your home if you want an active, raiding, fresh experience on Burning Crusade with Tier 6 and beyond still ahead. Season of Discovery's content is finished, but with a community push, it is seeing an uptick in activity, so if you want to play it, now is the time. Mists of Pandaria has reached its finale for raiders and class enthusiasts who want it. Hardcore is there whenever you fancy a completely different way to play World of Warcraft, and Classic Era will also always be there, I would imagine, as an unchanging home for the vanilla enthusiasts. Many different versions of the game, up to you which one you want to dive into, or whether you're just going to be waiting for BlizzCon to hear a little bit more about the future versions of the game too. So if you're deciding about whether or not to play Classic WoW, hopefully that should help you out. So what do you think? Are you going to be playing any version of Classic now, or are you waiting for BlizzCon? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.